March 3, 1943. For Japanese sailors bound for New Guinea, dawn brings calm seas. Then, at 250 miles per hour, shadows race low across the water. 8 B-25 bombers, modified against all orders, open fire with a new, devastating tactic. In 15 minutes, 4 destroyers and 8 transports are gone. Nearly 3,000 lives lost. What drove Allied airmen to break every rule and unleash a massacre that changed the Pacific War forever? In the months before the Bismarck Sea, Allied air crews faced a problem that defied every textbook. Hundreds of heavy bombers, B-17 bombers flying at 20,000 feet, were sent to intercept Japanese convoys off New Guinea. Each mission meant dozens of bombs dropped, each one guided by crosshairs and calculation. Yet on the water below, Japanese captains watched the sky with something close to amusement. Bombs would splash harmlessly, sometimes hundreds of meters from their targets. Mission logs from 1942 show sortie after sortie ending with the same result. Ships steaming on, cargo delivered, barely a scratch. Photographs from reconnaissance planes captured the aftermath, a line of craters trailing behind convoys, the ships untouched. In one report, a captain described turning the wheel as he watched bombs fall miles away, never even needing to break formation. Allied analysts counted the numbers. Less than 2% of bombs released from high altitude ever struck a moving ship. The Japanese supply line became an iron conveyor belt, delivering more than 80% of troops and materiel to New Guinea without serious disruption. For the men tasked with stopping these convoys, the evidence was impossible to ignore. The doctrine they had been taught, precision from above, had failed. Something had to change. General Douglas MacArthur had seen enough. He sent a sharp cable to his staff and said the air campaign against Japanese shipping was intolerable. The numbers left no room for debate. Convoys moved almost unopposed, delivering men and materiel to New Guinea with clockwork reliability. To MacArthur, this was not just a tactical failure, it was a strategic chokehold. He described the Japanese supply route as an iron conveyor belt, one that kept enemy garrisons alive and Allied offensives stalled. Every failed sortie meant another week of fighting in the jungle, another 1,000 enemy troops landing safely at Leh. In late 1942, staff planners gathered in stifling headquarters, combing through mission reports and shipping logs, searching for any sign of progress. None came. The official doctrine, built on high-altitude bombing and precision optics, had become a dead end. The enemy exploited it with almost casual ease. MacArthur's verdict was clear. New results were not just desired, they were demanded. Command cables and staff notes from this period show mounting frustration, with directives urging innovation and action, not more of the same. For the officers and mechanics on the ground, the message was unmistakable. The old rules had failed. The door was now open to anyone bold enough or desperate enough to try something different. Paul Weir. Papy Gunn arrived in Australia carrying little more than a uniform and a wound that never healed. In the chaos after the Japanese invasion of the Philippines, his wife Polly and their 4 children were captured and interned at Santo Tomas in Manila. Letters from the camp filtered out through the Red Cross, brief censored messages that offered no comfort, only reminders of distance and danger. Gunn's colleagues in the 5th Air Force described him as a man transformed by loss. He slept in the hangars, spent his days buried in engine grease and paperwork, and spoke little of anything but the war. Mechanics found him hunched over workbenches late into the night, hands blackened, eyes fixed on some distant calculation. In private, Gunn wrote that every enemy ship sunk, every new gun mounted, felt like a step toward his family. The war for him became a personal rescue mission. He was a pilot by training and a mechanic by trade. But grief had turned him into something else. A man determined to break the enemy supply line by any means he could invent. In the back corner of a makeshift workshop, Papy Gunn and his team stripped the nose from a B-25 Mitchell, tossing aside the glass and the bomb sight meant for high-altitude missions. In its place, they welded a solid metal shell thick enough to absorb recoil and shrapnel. The plan was simple: more guns, more firepower. They scrounged 50 caliber Browning machine guns from wrecked fighters and spare parts bins. The first prototype carried 4 guns, then 6. But Gunn was not satisfied. By late 1942, his crews had squeezed 8 forward-firing 50 caliber guns into the nose, each one linked to the pilot's trigger. Ammunition boxes, sheet metal bolted to the frame, fed the guns through a maze of chutes and cables. Mechanics drilled ventilation holes to keep barrels cool and carved out ejection ports for spent shells. On the firing range, a 2-second burst sent 100 pounds of lead downrange, enough to tear through a ship's bridge or silence a deck gun in seconds. Maintenance logs from the period note feed jams and cracked frames, but the results were undeniable. The B-25, once a medium bomber, now packed the punch of 3 fighters in a single armored nose. Gunn's conversion was not in any manual, but it was just the beginning of a new kind of attack. At Port Moresby, the new skip bombing tactic faced its first true test. Crews flew modified B-25s and A-20s low over the water, aiming for the wreck of the SS Pruth. Each run demanded precision. Bombers leveled out between 50 and 100 feet above the waves, throttles open at 240 miles per hour. The attack profile called for releasing a 500-pound bomb at a distance of 3 to 400 yards from the target. Instead of plunging straight down, the bomb bounced once or twice across the surface before slamming into the hull at the waterline. Film reels captured the results: direct hits and smoke pouring from the battered hulk, and strike rates that soared far beyond anything achieved from altitude. After action reports documented hit percentages climbing as high as 90% for practiced crews. In briefings, officers pored over footage and data, watching as theory became a proven method. The skip bombing envelope, 50 to 100 feet high, 3 to 400 yards out, was no longer just an experiment. It was ready for combat. Reconnaissance flights on March 1st and March 2nd spotted the Japanese convoy threading its way through the Bismarck Sea. 8 transports and 8 destroyers were packed with nearly 7,000 troops and supplies bound for Leh. Allied intelligence summaries poured in overnight, confirming course, speed, and escort strength. In the war rooms of 5th Air Force and RAAF Command, planners mapped out the attack. Staggered waves would strike, each with a distinct role. Gunn's modified B-25s would form the backbone, assigned to low-level strikes and strafing runs. A-20 Havocs would support, targeting the convoy's flanks. RAAF Beaufighters with their heavy armament would sweep in first at mast height, drawing fire and splitting the convoy's defensive focus. Orders were issued for a morning assault, but dense coastal weather forced a tense delay. Crews waited, engines idling on muddy airstrips, until a break in the clouds finally came. At 10:15 in the morning on March 3rd, the first attack wave lifted off, each unit locked into its assigned approach. The choreography was set for a strike that would test every lesson learned since Port Moresby. Engines roar so close to the water that the spray lifts in their wake. The first wave of Beaufighters sweeps in from the starboard side, guns blazing, drawing Japanese eyes and fire forward. Seconds later, B-25 Mitchells break from the haze, dropping to mast height, 850 caliber guns, hammering the decks with a storm of tracers. The air is thick with smoke and splinters. On the Oigawa Maru, a skipping 500-pound bomb crashes through the hull, detonating 5 seconds later in a blast that tears the ship apart. Men are thrown into the sea as burning oil spreads across the waves. Nearby, a transport loaded with aviation fuel erupts into a 500-foot fireball, the explosion visible for miles. Destroyers and transports veer wildly, colliding as captains shout orders drowned out by the chaos. Anti-aircraft gunners struggle to bring their weapons to bear, but the barrels cannot depress low enough. Within minutes, 8 transports and 4 destroyers are left burning or sinking. The water is choked with debris and men, the convoy shattered in 15 minutes of relentless attack. Wartime innovation often comes from desperation, not doctrine. Today, militaries race to adapt faster than their adversaries, knowing a single field-borne idea can reshape a conflict overnight. The true risk is not in breaking rules, but in failing to question them. What boundaries will necessity push next?